Fellow Falcoholics, what is up? Welcome to episode 260 of the Falcoholic Live. I'm your host, Kevin Knight, at Falcoholic Kevin, joined by our resident pinch hitter. He is Daniel Flick, at by Daniel Flick. Adnan once again playing hooky. No, Adnan has a very important business meeting, I'm sure, tonight. That's not sarcasm. He actually is busy, but always happy to have Daniel on. Daniel, I think you've officially, like, every time you've risen up the batting order every time, and the consistency is important. And I think you unlike the Falcons, you're getting better every single week. So
yeah, I try to. Some people have all the talent in the world. Some people have all the skill in the world. Some people are just reliable. I tend to think of myself as just like flying under the radar, occasionally scrappy, gritty, if you will, and always reliable. I'm like the guy, probably seventh, eighth man on, rolling in and just off the bench. It's probably not going to score 10 to 12 points a game off the bench, but probably, 4 to 5 points, grab a couple rebounds and, exit the game with a positive plus minus. And at the end of the day, that's all you can ask for. Winners win, they say. And so we're going to try to win tonight.
That's going to stack some dubs. Yeah, even if the Falcons can't stack dubs on the field, we're going to stack dubs on this program. But no, that is going to be one of our topics tonight. The Falcons being at a crossroads here in Week 7 at 3-3 with a critical division game coming up against a team that probably is expected to beat the Falcons. Not by that much, actually. I think the Bucs are only 2.5-point home favorites, which basically suggests that it's kind of a wash. But we'll get into that, guys. We're going to, of course, start off the top with the little bit of news we got this week about Jalen Hawkins and Micah Abernathy switching up. Welcome, Jason. What's up, everyone in the chat? Thanks for joining us tonight. We'll go through. We'll talk about the state of the teams. Talk about Desmond Ridder, of course. I think last time Daniel was on, it was like when Desmond Ridder, the negativity was at its peak. Rightly so. After Week 4. Now we've had a couple of different games since then, so that'll be an interested to get Daniel's take, sort of how things have changed, how things have stayed the same since then. We'll dive into all those topics tonight, guys. Thanks for joining us. Before we do, of course, want to bring you a word from tonight's sponsor, betonline.ag. Folks, it is a Texas showdown in the postseason, and BetOnline is your number one source for all your baseball wagering info with up-to-the-minute stats, news, and scores. Hold on, let me pull up this new copy. And matchup breakdowns also. Get the latest game odds, spreads, and totals for the MLB, NFL, and college football at your fingertips with BetOnline's real-time updates on statistics, news, and odds. They've got everything you need to stay up to speed on each league championship series all the way through to the World Series itself. We'll also, of course, have football stuff coming your way all the way to the college football playoff and Super Bowl on BetOnline. So no matter what you want to bet on, guys, head to that website, betonline.ag today, or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Just don't forget to use our promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, Daniel, let's start with the news, the little bit of news. Jalen Hawkins ends up getting released in favor of Micah Abernathy coming off the practice squad. Back in camp, I think we talked about it. I was sort of like predicting that maybe Abernathy might make it over Hawkins because of the cap space. They don't end up doing that coming out of camp, but they do end up doing it now partway through the season. Unfortunately, don't get the cap savings as a result. But curious your thoughts on how the safety depth chart is getting shuffled here.
Yeah, I think DeMarcco Hellams here is where the conversation has to start. First 3 weeks, Hellams did not play a snap on defense. And then week 4, he plays, I want to say 12, comes back in week 5. He gets shut out. Hawkins plays 8. And then he comes back in week 6. Hellams plays, I think, 10 or 12 again, and Hawkins is shut out again. And so it's like their playing time was entirely inversely correlated. And so I think if you're the Falcons, I think Mike Rothstein had a good tweet yesterday about how now Matt Hennessy is the last player from the old regime who has not been either extended or released or signed, of course, with Arthur Smith and Fontenot and the entire new regime. And so I think in that conversation, you look at it as with Hellams, he's our guy, our 7th round draft pick, our rookie who led our team in tackles versus Hellams, Hawkins, who is, again, not exactly not our guy, because again, he was a starter last year, and Arthur Smith would be the first to tell you that if you're on the team, you are one of our guys. But there's not that same type of attachment there. And if you're going to be picking one or the other, you're probably going to want to lean the guy who's younger, cheaper, and again, one of your draft picks, and also again, contractually controllable. Because Hellams is under contract for the next 3 years. Hawkins was probably not going to be re-signed this offseason. And so at that point, you're just kind of taking snaps away from Hellams when he could be, evolving his skill set and adding to his wealth of NFL experience. So, or lack thereof for, right now. So that was kind of where my mind went first. For me, the thing that was really interesting is that Jerry Gray, a couple times during the last month, has talked about Hawkins being, a valuable presence and how they had packages for him. And then when Troy Anderson got hurt and they kind of moved Richie Grant around a little bit, put him kind of in that linebacker spot in certain packages as well, I kind of thought Hawkins' spot was safe. And so that's why the news kind of caught me by surprise. But I still think that DeMarcco Hellams and the way that he's played, I would like to think that Atlanta internally is quite fond of Hellams. Again, there's a reason he made the roster, and then there's a reason why you've seen his role continue to kind of ascend in recent weeks. And so I think moving on from Hawkins is playing a pretty big percentage of special team snaps, but if you feel like Micah Abernathy can fill that role, and again, Hellams was also playing quite a bit of special teams as well, then I think it's really just a matter of who do we want as our third safety? And again, I revisit all those points I was talking about earlier with he's more controllable, he's younger, he's cheaper, he's their guy. And so I think from that perspective, it makes sense. I understand the fans who are like, well, if we're going to carry 4 safeties, I'd rather have Hawkins than Abernathy. I get that, but I also completely understand where the Falcons are coming from. And again, I think there's a more defined picture with Hellams as your third safety and then Abernathy as your 4 versus having that Hellams versus Hawkins kind of situation that we've seen in recent weeks where it's just inconsistent playing time for the two of them. So,
yeah, I mean, it doesn't shock me that they want to get more of their guy, like the guy they drafted. It doesn't shock me, particularly with Hawkins not necessarily like making huge impact on his snaps. He wasn't playing much on defense, but it wasn't a huge impact. And I think you look at Hawkins' special teams and it was like, okay. I think he had a pretty good game against Jacksonville, where he had a tackle, but wasn't really moving the needle on special teams. And they decided to go ahead and go with the younger guy in Hellams, who I think has definitely been making more of an impact on his snaps on defense. And I think we were pretty impressed, the two of us, with his play in preseason, how quickly he adapted to the NFL and how much it really didn't look like he was a liability in coverage. I know coming out, people were sort of questioning his athleticism and his ability to hold up on the back end. And I think ultimately it's been pretty much fine. I don't think he's ever going to be like a huge plus guy as a deep coverage safety, but in terms of box stuff, I think he's absolutely fine there. He showed in college he could handle that without too much trouble. And just not shocked that they want to get him more reps. Hellams hasn't exactly been a terrific special teamer so far for the Falcons either. He's been fairly average. I think both he and Hawkins had basically the exact same special teams grade. So it's not like Hawkins was giving them significantly better play on special teams. But you look at Micah Abernathy, who was a guy that was around the team a lot last year, finally got an opportunity to play on special teams this week, played 15 snaps, had a special teams tackle, graded out in the 70s on special teams. So my guess is they view Abernathy as a better special teams player than Hawkins. So they'd rather have him active as the 4th safety and give those few defensive snaps, if any, to DeMarcco Hellams at this stage.
Yeah, I would completely agree with you. I'm glad that you brought up that Abernathy was, rather impactful, and if not, performing better than Hawkins was on teams. I think that was kind of where my mind started to wander. I didn't have the actual numbers in front of me, but so I'm glad that you brought that up, because in my mind, when I heard the news and I thought about Abernathy being active, I kind of thought about that maybe being a tryout for him. Just kind of the Falcons testing the waters a bit there to see if they could make it work, where Abernathy, could take over that role as primary special teams guy, number 4 safety, and how he could handle that. And evidently it appears that if they liked how he played in that regard, and again, kind of like what I was saying earlier, I think they're pretty pleased with how Hawkins has played, Hellams has played in his 20-ish snaps. the starting defense. So again, I tend to think that DeMarcco Hellams has been throughout training camp. He was for sure one of those guys who just continually seemed to impress, even when his stock was rising. He still found ways to impress. He's always around the football, very instinctual, and the guy just makes tackles. He's always around the football. I mean, he led Alabama in tackles last year, led Atlanta in tackles this preseason. Those types of guys, I think Jesse Bates was talking about it, how everybody can tackle in the NFL, but it takes I'm pretty sure what he said is that there are like a few guys who can like legitimately consistently be around the football, making plays on the football. And I think DeMarcco Hellams is one of those guys who in his limited reps in Atlanta has proven that he is one of those guys, and has kind of continued proving that from what he showed throughout 2 years starting at Alabama. So I think you know what you're getting, and I think they've got to be pretty pleased with that, and knowing that kind of projects favorably with special teams as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I definitely like what we've seen from Hellams so far, and I'm excited to see him get more snaps. And it's just, we just sort of know what we were getting from Jalen Hawkins, and I think he was a fine third safety, fine depth safety, not necessarily a plus. And that leads into a sort of wider conversation about Richie Grant sort of not being impactful at this stage either. Richie Grant has had the flash plays that I think Hawkins lacks. Obviously, Hawkins, I think, has been more consistently sort of average. But unlike Richie Grant, Hawkins was not a draft pick of this regime, and he was not a second-round draft pick of this regime. So they're going to give Richie Grant every opportunity this season to sort of prove himself and show that he can be the starter next to Jesse Bates. And if he can't, then they'll go out and get somebody else this next season. A lot of guys, I think, are sort of in that situation this year where, okay, like, this is your opportunity, show us what you can do. Arnold Ebiketie, I think, to some extent is in that. And speaking of Ebiketie, we have some nice things to say about him this week too. But there's a lot of guys from that 2021 class and from the 2022 class that are really auditioning for long-term roles on this team. But not much is set in stone at this stage, because like we talked about in the offseason, even, that not only was the team in good shape in 2023 to make moves in free agency in the draft, they're in excellent shape next year as well. So they're not necessarily tied to many of these guys that, they're tied to the guys they just gave big money to, obviously, like David Onyemata and Bates and all that, which have worked out swimmingly, obviously, but they're not necessarily tied to any of these guys. So if they want a long-term role on this team, they've really got to step up and earn it this year.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. And I continue to kind of think back on the fact that if you're trying to draft and develop the way that the Falcons are, because again, as you said, they had the money last year, they're going to have the money this year, but really the way that so many contenders nowadays, especially if you're in a situation like Atlanta was, where they had to completely flip over the roster, you're still going to have to rely so heavily on the draft. And I mean, really, I'm not sure what the exact numbers are. I'm pretty sure it's like 50 to 60% of rosters are made up of players drafted on the third day or signed undrafted free agency. Yeah. It's a huge number. And so I think, again, Hawkins fit that bill, but he's also in that same boat of, like you said, what you have in him as far as his ceiling, and he's probably already hit his ceiling. And with Hellams, I think you're still kind of figuring out just how impactful he can be, because you've already seen, like I was mentioning, you've already seen that he can make an impact. You've already seen he can be consistently around the football. I think now you're just trying to figure out, can he be more than a core special teams player? Can he be a legitimate third safety who we can rely on in certain packages? And I think that's what we're going to find out here kind of throughout the second half of this season. But really, again, it kind of feels like a Michael Walker situation from his rookie year. If you recall back on that, to where he was kind of thrown into the fire a little bit at times and saw his role open up a little bit, and then kind of ascended into that starting role a year or two later. And we kind of saw what his ceiling was, and they moved on from him, right? But it's like, you're not going to figure out what exactly you have in Hellams, because with Walker, it was the same deal of, like, you saw the flash plays. There was a lot of intrigue around, hey, can he be a starting linebacker? And I remember there was quite a bit of people who thought that he could be. Then you see him as a starting linebacker, and it's not really what you were hoping for. And so I think with Hellams, the Falcons know what they have in Hawkins. They don't entirely know what they have in Hellams yet. And I think that's ultimately the most important part here of that. And when you're kind of fighting over a core special team spot and a third safety who's playing like 10 to 12 snaps a game, I think you're always probably leaning more towards the upside play. Especially when you have that money coming this offseason, you can afford to add. And I think it's good to know what spots you have. And with Hawkins not a part of their long-term plans, if they know that they have Hellams as a third safety, and you've got Richie Grant, Jesse Bates locked up, you don't really have to spend on a safety this offseason. So I think it's important on that element, just kind of figuring out offseason planning. Even now, I'm sure that's not exactly at the forefront of their mind, but I think that's for sure a positive side effect of this whole thing.
Yeah, definitely. I'm sort of sticking to my preseason prediction of DeMarcco Hellams being like a more versatile Kamal Ishmael type of player who can be that sort of long-term third safety, depth safety. I think he's got more upside than Ishmael did. And as much as I loved UCF legend Kamal Ishmael, it's I think Hellams has more coverage ability, certainly. So
Kamal Ishmael he was a guy.
He was a hitter.
Legend. I'm very glad you brought that up. Yeah. Kamal Ishmael.
Yeah.
I will always fondly remember Kamal Ishmael. Kamal Ishmael, to be completely honest with you.
One of the better 7th round picks of the Dimitrov era. So
yeah. One of the better UCF Knights of the 2010s.
Yeah. UCF legend. Yeah, exactly.
UCF legend.
Because we had to get off the Bortles train, unfortunately. Legendary college quarterback Blake Bortles, certainly. But
Mike Hughes, another UCF legend.
There you go. We got a lot of UCF legends around here these days. But let's move on to talking about the team itself. And last time we had you on, like we were saying at the top of the show, was the Falcons coming off that second loss at 2-2. Now we have you back. They're 3-3. I can't blame you for that, because we're having you on after the loss. So it's not your fault necessarily, but it's more of a coincidence than anything. It's weird that it's happened twice, but I thought I watched that game a couple times now just because it's a perplexing game, because I come out like live watching it. I was like, wow, this was terrible. This was like the worst game I've ever seen, which, fair to anyone that watched it. Right. But watching it like a second time when the energy was not as intense, when I was more evaluating, I didn't think it was that bad. In fact, I thought the Falcons outplayed the Commanders through most of the game. There are obviously a few really key mistakes that cost the Falcons the game, and ultimately that led to the loss, right? And that's the only thing that counts in terms of the standings. There's no moral victories, but in particular, I think you were pretty down on Desmond Ridder after week 4. More down than I was, I think, a little bit. I was more in the wait and see camp. I think you're more in the like pushing, like, okay, how long are we going to give this? And I think that's totally fair. Like we had a good conversation about it, I think. At this stage, I don't know. I actually thought this was Desmond Ridder's like second best game throwing the ball. If you're not looking at the turnovers, obviously, I mean, but you can't like ignore the turnovers. But I think in terms of like down to down, this was a pretty good game of throwing the football. Where I thought he was hitting his receivers. They were moving the ball up and down the field in the passing game, despite the running game not really being effective. I came out like thinking that this actually wasn't a bad game, but then there were the turnovers. So it's like, it keeps you from being like, oh, it wasn't that bad. It's like, it was kind of bad, but, there was a lot that went into it, but I'm curious your thoughts now that a couple days have passed. Was it as bad as it sort of felt like in the moment to you, or do you feel it a little bit differently about it at this point?
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. When I watching that game, I didn't leave that game feeling bad about Ridder. Like it was so before I really dive into this, I want to throw out 2 stats that I actually looked up right before I got on. Arthur Smith so I went back and looked, and Arthur Smith has actually never had a quarterback eclipse the 300-yard passing mark in 3 straight games. I want to say Matt Ryan did it he went 2 straight games once, which Ridder just hit last weekend. If he gets 300 this weekend, he'll be the first quarterback under Arthur Smith. This is including his time in Tennessee as the OC. he would be the first quarterback to hit 300 passing yards in 3 straight games. On a similar note, an Arthur Smith offense has never – no, I'm sorry. The Falcons, the last time the Falcons had 2 straight games of 400 total yards of offense was the last 3 weeks of the 2018 season. They had 447, I want to say, against Houston, and 405 or something. No, 402 against Washington. So you're seeing signs of the offense improving here. You're seeing the passing game open up some things. You're seeing the passing game evolve. You're seeing that really improve the overall ability of the offense to actually move the football. And you are 100% correct. I was very down on Ridder. I was probably too harsh on him in that moment, considering how relatively inexperienced he was, and really still is. I mean, I've always preached patience with people, and I kind of saw the way he played against Jacksonville and Detroit. And again, at that point, the previous 2 games have not been very pretty. Really, most of the season hadn't been very pretty outside of the second half against Green Bay and then a little bit of that Carolina game. But I think the last 2 weeks, he's proven he can play and play at a pretty good level and legitimately put up efficient yards and efficiency and actually move the football at a very decent level. Again, they didn't finish drives the way that they would have preferred really either last 2 games. I think back with, some of the things that happened against Houston with really all the mistakes and some of the fumbling and just variety of issues that kind of arose there. But, you think back on that, you think about how well they moved the football last week. Really the last 2 weeks, it's been so much better. And I think with Ridder, he looks more comfortable. I want to see it translate to the road. That is a big, big talking point. You really want to see him produce on the road because he hasn't really done that yet. So, I mean, like last year in Baltimore, he was fine. I thought he was okay in Baltimore. But other than that, his 2 this year haven't been very good. I think he'd be the first to tell you that. Yeah. So I would like to see that translate. But just, overall thoughts on Ridder, I think I'm encouraged by what I've seen lately. And I think I would tend to agree with you that the way he played, you can't just throw out the interceptions.
No,
right?
You can't.
Like, I mean,
it's part of the eval. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But other than I'm sure the 3 throws you'd rather have back, there were so many positives from that game. I felt like for the most part, he showed quite a bit with his arm. I thought he looked in control. I thought he was seeing the field pretty well on a majority of those throws. And again, you're going to have lapses of judgment that are frankly in large part because he just hasn't played much NFL football yet. And again, you're going to have people saying, well, he's played 10 games. How much more time should we give him? I think what I've learned lately is that he's trending in the right direction, and the Falcons see that. The Falcons believe in him, and you're going to see him for several more weeks. Like, it would take something catastrophic for him to not be the quarterback, I think, like 3 weeks from now. So I tend to think that they believe in him, and the last 2 weeks, the way they've been able to move the football, and I think, in the offseason, Arthur Smith had a stated goal of becoming more balanced. The way they're opening things up, passing the football right now should only help the running game. And I'm excited about the way the offense is trending. It's just going to come down to finishing drives. But I think for sure my tone on Ridder and my overall take on him as a football player and how high his ceiling is for sure changed in the last 2 weeks since the last time I came on.
Yeah, I mean, the offense just looks better. I mean, it hasn't translated completely, but it just looks better. It doesn't look as disjointed. It doesn't look as lifeless. It's really just been the mistakes. And like you look around the NFL, like that's the thing. I think Falcons fans and most fans of teams that don't have franchise quarterbacks, they're just not used to seeing quarterback play, what it looks like when you don't have the guy or what it looks like to have a developing quarterback. It's just when you've had Matt Ryan in here for so long, there's a certain, I think, expectation for what week to week it looks like. And like, I'm not trying to blame people for having that mentality, but look around the NFL at quarterback play and on the whole, it's not great. Like, good quarterbacks are going to have bad games. Bad quarterbacks are going to have good games. Like, there's just a lot of variation week to week. What separates the good from the bad is that the good quarterbacks typically have those really good games, and they'll have more good games than bad games. But you look at Justin Herbert, he had a bad game, missed wide open receivers like 4 times, threw picks, cost the Chargers that game arguably in the end. No one's saying Justin Herbert's a bust after that bad game, and there's lots of reasons for that. He's shown obviously over many years that he's a good quarterback, but even Justin Herbert has a bad game. Patrick Mahomes will have some bad games, not frequently for Patrick Mahomes, but he does occasionally have a bad game. But like, even outside of that top tier, you'll get guys that have bad games all the time. I mean, you look at last week with Jalen Hurts, right? Basically identical stat line to Desmond Ridder. Had a little bit more on the ground, fewer passing yards, but 2 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, and they lose the game. So, but no one's questioning Jalen Hurts. And again, Jalen Hurts has proven that he deserves the benefit of the doubt. So we're still waiting for Ridder to get to that point. Like, Ridder's not beyond reproach, but I think it's just unrealistic expectations. And again, like, that's bound to happen. Like, it's not like it's a Falcons fan only thing. Like, this is something that happens to every team. But man, I really think that these last 2 weeks, you just feel a lot better about Ridder, even though it hasn't translated to 2 wins. It's translated to 1 win and 1 loss. Like, the offense as a whole, I think, just looks and feels a lot better. It doesn't feel as stilted. I feel like they're close, Daniel. I don't know if you feel the same. Like, they're close to something. They're close to like breaking through, or they're close to just imploding. I don't know which one it is, and that was one of the taglines of this video. But what do you think? Do you think they're, because this is a crucial game this week against the Bucs. Like, if the Falcons win this game on the road in Tampa Bay, they've got to win against the presumptive favorite for the division. They will take over first place in the division, and they'll have a 2-0 NFC South record with an opportunity to sweep the Bucs later in the season when they play at home. So that is obviously huge. You'll also get Ridder his first road win and all this stuff. So like, this is a critical game. And I feel like they might be close to like actually coming together here, but maybe I could be really wrong about that. I don't know.
I think they are closer to finding something positive and to kind of getting over that proverbial hump. I think if they were closer to imploding, I tend to think it would be more like Jaguars-esque offensive performances. And I think with what they've shown lately, because again, Arthur Smith has shown, I mean, last year's offense, the way that the proficiency with which they could run the football, I think inspires confidence that this year's team should at some point be able to find that gear. And I think they're close. And I think the more that Ridder continues to show, I think they're about 1 or 2 legitimately connected deep shots away from just completely opening up the floodgates. The problem is, can Ridder hit that? He was close with Van Jefferson. I think the Falcons liked that a lot in Van Jefferson. That's what Arthur Smith was saying Monday, I believe it was, that they love how intelligent he is and that he adds that element of being able to really open things up for them. And again, that's a tough ball to hit, considering that you've been throwing to that guy in practice for 3 days. So if they can connect on a few of those, if you can kind of see them push the ball a little bit more, I think you'll see that running game open up. And I think that's when you get much closer to being legitimate and to being because like, again, they've moved the ball well the last 2 weeks. It's just going to be about finishing drives, which I think Bijan was talking about that today, actually, that they just, it's red zone execution. They were really not as efficient as you would have liked against Washington. And again, that was a criticism of Arthur Smith in 2021, and really has continually been a criticism through his time in Atlanta. Having a good running game helps you out so much, just like, whether it's a go-to-go situation, whether it's 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2 from the 15, like whatever it may be, if you don't have that running thread, it's just so hard. And I think Atlanta needs to get Tyler Algier rolling. Week 1, he came out of the gates firing, and it's like, okay, him and Bijan can really coexist. And then since that game, it's just been really tough sledding for him. So I think if you can get Algier rolling a little bit, the holes haven't really been there. I believe the Falcons are facing the most 8-man boxes or just overall stacked boxes in the league right now, which Arthur Smith said was misleading. And his explanation about how you can drop out of that or add to that or whatever it may be for each individual team was for sure valid. But I think it's important still to realize that teams, I mean, everybody knows the quote that I think it was Jimmy Ward had, where he's like, they don't really want to pass the ball. If you can start to break that narrative, it's going to take the offense up to that next level. And again, since that's already the thought process, I don't really think they're that close to imploding, just for the pure fact that I think their floor has already been shown. They've pretty much, I'd say they've moved far beyond where they were at in Jacksonville if Ridder can continue to play at the level he's shown in the last 2 weeks. So I'm optimistic about it. I think it's going to be a big game for sure. I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit more later, but it's a big opportunity. I'm not sure if Jerome Boger is officiating this week. That'll be something to monitor. I'm sure Grady Jarrett is hoping he's not, but yeah, it should be it's a big game. I think it's a big game for the headspace, for the mental, for a lot of fans as well. And I think for the team really, and for all the reasons you mentioned of, you start 2-0 in the NFC South, and you get Ridder his first win on the road. It would be kind of poetic if he loses his first home game in 8 years and wins his first game on the road as a professional next week.
That's what I was saying. That's what I was trying to say. I was like, oh yeah, we'll just break all the streaks this week. We'll get rid of all those pesky streaks at once. But it's a tough test because the Bucs do have a good defense. But yeah, I mean, you honed in on it, and I wanted to address it too. Like, the run game just hasn't been working the last several weeks. Like, basically since week 4, it's been pretty inept even. I would say it's been thoroughly mediocre. And I don't really understand it because the passing game has been working. So it's like, now the passing game is working, run game's not coming along. What do you think's going on there with the run game at this point, Daniel?
Yeah, it doesn't feel like there's very many holes. And again, it's so confusing to me because you look at it and you return 4 or 5 starters from last year, and you should, in theory, have only upgraded that left guard, and I think the Falcons did, with Matthew Bergeron sliding in for the revolving door at left guard that they had last year with Elijah Wilkinson, Colby Gossett, Matt Hennessy, and just, the on and on and on with all the injuries they had. So the line in general should be better. It's just you're not really seeing it click. And again, they are facing loaded boxes. I just think with where they're at right now, I think you're seeing teams make the Falcons beat them through the air, and you're seeing guys trigger downhill a little bit quicker. And again, I think Caleb McGarry was saying this on Sunday via Josh Kendall of The Athletic. Shout out to Josh, very good friend of the program here. That the line of this offense and how complicated it is. He said the margin of error is razor thin. And if you're not fully in sync, and if you're not, again, it could just be 1 or 2 minor things here or there, whether it's a guy not sealing or whether it's a guy who just can't quite reach at the second level, whatever it may be. You're just a little bit off. That linebacker's shooting that gap, that safety's crashing, and that alley that you thought you had is closed. And then the next thing you know, you've got 2 guys running right at you, and you've got nowhere to go, and you're gaining 2 yards, 3 yards. I thought Tyler Algier ran with a little bit more confidence against Washington. I thought you could see signs of him looking more like his former self from last year, just more physical, more aggressive. He looked better. I just think at times with the lack of lanes he had, he looked a little timid. And again, I'm not an NFL running backs coach, but again, he had that mentality last year, and you could just feel his physicality just watching him run. And it felt like at times, kind of in that week 3 to week 5-ish stretch, that he just wasn't hitting the hole maybe as hard as he once was, or lowering his pads and really running for the contact the way that he was at the end of last year, even in week 1 this year. And I thought he was getting a little bit back closer to that last week, which I think positively reflects on the offensive line as well. So I think it's really just, I tend to think that the Falcons feel they're close. And I think it's just going to be a matter of, can we pass it enough? Can we spread you out enough to where, you are kind of opening up more lanes inside? And I think a lot of people have seen the viral clip now of Ryan Newsel, the block in space that, again, in years past was probably a Parker Hesse block that is no longer a Parker Hesse block. And it's just kind of an interesting situation because, like, personnel-wise, they're not that far removed from last year. They should have only improved. I think they're about 45 yards off where they were last year still. And so I think it's something that we should see improve as the year progresses. I'm excited to watch that play out because I think the Falcons will at some point get back to that identity. And I think Arthur Smith was talking about how they were improving as things went along Sunday. It's just they threw the ball 47 times. So
Yeah.
I'm excited. I think the run game might travel to Tampa, and I think this might be a week they actually have a little bit more success than in weeks faster. I think they are starting to find something a little bit there.
Yeah, I mean it's weird because it like it used to be, and part of the reason, like I get people like see that they lost the game. Like, why are you positive they lost the game? Because like win and loss is one thing, but we have to also just analyze what's going on too, both for content and just personal interest. And like, yes, they did lose, but like before the last 2 weeks, you would have said like the Falcons aren't even capable of throwing 40 plus passes in a game. Like the offense just would completely fall apart. And not only did it not fall apart, it was rolling. Like they were marching up and down the field. They piled up over 400 yards, over 300 yards passing. And yes, the mistakes. Like you can't have the mistakes. Like we all know that. But there's not a whole lot more we can say about that. Like that's why we're sort of glossing over that. Not because it's not important. It is. Like you can't. Like Ridder can't lead the league in turnover-worthy plays. Like we can't have that. Like that's got to stop. Full stop. No questions asked. But we can't really say much more about that other than like, yeah, you got to clean that up. I mean, there's certainly little things that need to change, right? Like we could have better play calls. We could have better route concepts. We could have receivers creating more separation. We could have people not making mistakes in their option routes, like Bijan. Maybe we should take that off Bijan's plate, not ask him to run option routes as a rookie running back. But I don't know. So there's a lot of things that could change. Maybe we could get better snaps from Drew Dahlman. The pass protection, to its credit, I think has definitely stepped up. That's been an improvement. It almost feels like if we could just get the run game and the pass game to play well at the same time, we'd be unstoppable. But we haven't seen that. We haven't seen that at all yet.
Yeah, I think the only time it really felt like that was probably that fourth quarter against Green Bay, where it felt like everything kind of merged together and it all felt great. And you're watching and you're like, wow, this is a very wholesome feeling inside. Very satisfying. And you're 100% right. It's like one thing works, the other thing is just not at all there, and vice versa. Then you have kind of games like we saw in Detroit where you have neither working, and then it's just not a whole lot of fun for anybody. But I think, again, as Ridder continues to, hopefully for his sake, for the team's sake, have productive passing games, things should only open up on the ground. It just feels like mathematically hard to believe that a running offense that was third best in the NFL last year, averaged a little bit under 160 yards a game, can have a quarterback come out and throw for 300 plus yards in back-to-back weeks, and somehow your rushing offense is still really not even looking anywhere close to what it was last year. And that feels like one of those things that is just not a sustainable trend, to where I think we will, again, I think it could be as early as this weekend, see that trend flip, see that rushing offense really pick up. And when it does, I think it could be a beautiful thing, because then you open up play action. And then I think Ritter's proven really last year, I thought at the end of his, tryout last year, he was really efficient, resetting his eyes, resetting his feet, finding open guys over the middle. If you can start to unlock that part of the game, and again, that's just going to open up more things vertically for you as well. It's just going to make the offense run a whole lot smoother. And I think that the pieces are there. We've seen so much potential. They've got the weapons. They now, with Van Jefferson, they have a legitimate speed threat who's proven he can. I'm pretty sure he was like top 5 in the NFL in explosive plays in 2021, or like percentage of explosive plays. I mean, he's it feels like they have all the ingredients for it. They're just figuring out a way to put them all together and make that full 4-course, whatever it is, meal of like, hey, we're going to come out, we're going to, if you want to stop the run, we're going to throw for 300 yards on you. If you want to stop the pass, we're going to run for 170 on you, and it feels like they're just kind of stuck, and it's just, there's not at that complementary level quite yet. And I think it's going to happen. It's going to happen. I feel fairly confident in saying that we will see that happen sooner rather than later, which is why I'm more confident that they're closer to, finding something good than finding implosion. So kind of tying a couple points together there.
Yeah, no, that's all good points. And it's tough because, it's frustrating. I think, there's added stuff because the defense is so good that it, like, I think pushes things forward, because now it's like we were sort of expecting the defense to be not that great. And then it's like, oh, well, maybe this team will just need some time to get on its feet. But like now the defense is like ready to go, playing great football, and like the offense is letting them down, obviously. And it's frustrating. It's frustrating to watch, obviously. It sort of is what it is. Certainly, I'm not enjoying watching the offense. I mean, how many times did they get it? The defense gave the offense 3 chances to score that touchdown late in the game. They didn't score once.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's pretty incredible. That's like, we needed 1 possession to tie this up, and they gave them 3, and they couldn't do it. So, we all know where the problems are. It's on offense, and they need to just get through whatever they're dealing with. Like I think we're both on the same page that it feels like they're close to something, but like, is it like this week? Is it next week? Is it 2 weeks from now? Because they're running out of time to get this right. I mean, we're getting into late October. Once November happens, it's sort of that's kind of when you know what teams are by the time November hits. Like there's not a lot, you can obviously get hot. I mean, 2016 Falcons, team kind of oddly similar to this team, not anywhere near as bad offensively, obviously, but a team that kind of scuffled out of the gate a little bit and then got hot and made the Super Bowl. Now, I'm not comparing this team to that team in terms of offensive ceiling at this stage without Matt Ryan here, but there's a chance that they could get this together. And then if this offense is just average with this defense, you can win 10, 11 games, no problem. And that's why I'm still not moving off my 10-win prediction. I still think we're pretty close to that number, but we have to start like playing that way, like now, like we don't have a lot more time to wait around for this to happen.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I'm glad that you brought up the point about November. I think that's kind of when you start to see separation happen quite a bit as well. But again, I think it's also encouraging for the Falcons' sake that they are 3-3 and they are half a game out of the NFC South. And it doesn't feel like they've particularly played anywhere close to a full game on offense. And so I think if you're looking for reasons for optimism, which I think a lot of people are and really should be, because again, this is a team that has the talent to make a legitimate playoff push and make it for the first time in 6 years and bring back some positive feelings within a fan base in a city that could really use it surrounding Falcons football. And I tend to think that with the offense still kind of, there's so many young pieces there, right? And it was always going to be a matter of time. And I think there's such a feeling of, they had the whole offseason together. Hopefully they'll click early. And that's just not really been the case so far. But again, you're seeing them start to put it together, and you're seeing glimpses of them putting it together. And you just get the feeling that it's going to happen. And I think I've said that 3 times by now. And I continue to firmly believe it every time that I say it, that they will at some point, again, quite soon, I feel like, put it together. They have the pieces, and I think you've seen each individual piece break out in their own separate ways. And now it's just going to be bringing them all together. I think Arthur Smith takes a lot of responsibility for that. But again, some of this stuff has been executional, and it's like drop pass here, a fumble here, a missed block here, a misread here, and so it's like, it's there. We've seen that it's there. We've seen that there's young talent who can play at a high level. And I think we've seen a coach who's proven he can maximize rosters. And so I think I personally, some of the Arthur Smith hate that I've seen, I don't agree with really at all. And so I personally think that the Falcons have much brighter days ahead in 2023. I tend to think this is a team that we're starting to see that light switch kind of flicker a little bit. And I think over the next 2 to 3 weeks, we're going to see it turn on fully. And again, it's got to translate to points, because it's kind of like what I was talking about earlier. They've had 850 something yards of offense the last 2 weeks, and they've scored 37 total points.
Yeah.
And so it's like, you can look really good, but if you're not scoring, you're not executing when you need it, it really won't end up mattering in the end. So I think they're going through some of those growing pains. I think they're learning some hard lessons. And I think that as that continues to happen, you're going to see them either make the same mistake, and that's when you realize it's a lost season, or they're going to learn from it. And I tend to think that with the people they have, the mentality that they have, and some of the way that those guys are wired from the neck up, I think you're going to see them learn and improve and put it all together. Really, I would tend to think this week, but for sure in the second half, which is somehow, some way fast approaching.
Yeah. And, we certainly all hope for our sanity, for our enjoyment, for many reasons. We hope that we're right. Like, cause it's just a gut feeling for me. Like, I mean, I do think, what we've seen on the field has been better over the last few weeks in terms of the offense. But like they just haven't put it together. And some teams will never, like, it just never happens. Like, they don't put it together. They languish, they fall off, they implode. Right. But I think the chance for improvement is there. I think it's realistic. Now, I don't know if it's this week, because this is a tough defense. Like, Tampa Bay's defense is almost identically ranked to Atlanta's. Not quite as good against the pass, a little bit better against the run, but very similarly ranked in terms of all the other statistics. So this is a tough defense to move the ball on. Now, that being said, the Bucs have played like an even easier schedule than the Falcons at this point. Like, so, I mean, it's not like they've played a juggernaut or anything like that. And they actually lost by the exact same score to the Detroit Lions, which I thought was funny. And I guess, I don't know. I'm waiting around for Baker to become Baker again, because I just don't think it's sustainable what he's been doing. But I'm curious what you think about this matchup with the Bucs this week.
Yeah, it feels like the Falcons and the Bucs are two teams that over the second half of the season, at least on paper and preseason expectations, you kind of expect the Falcons to improve and you'd expect Tampa to regress. But again, from what we've seen so far, Tampa's outperformed quite a bit of people's expectations. A lot of people thought that this team would be, 6-11, I tend to think. And a lot of people really weren't talking a whole lot about them in that NFC South title race. I feel like it was a whole lot of Atlanta, New Orleans. What if Carolina can put some things together? And right now, you look at the top of the NFC South, and it's the one team you wouldn't expect. And so, really with Tampa Bay, it feels like the talent is – I've been fond of Rachaad White for a while, and I'm very glad that he's kind of had that opportunity to really evolve and take over a larger role there. And I think when you see Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, and you see some of the talent that they have on that roster, I think Jesse Bates was talking about it today. Like, they've got so many good pieces there that you wouldn't really think about initially. There's legit talent. And so it's definitely a challenge. We know all about Tampa's defense and some of the guys out there. I know Vita Vea is questionable right now. I think he was limited today in practice. But again, that's a team that historically, as it feels like Atlanta pretty frequently split with them pre-Brady. And so even last year split with them. Obviously, they took Brady out relatively early. So it's definitely going to be a matchup. I think the Falcons can win that game. I think it's a very winnable NFC South road game. It's a game that I think Atlanta on paper is a more talented team. And it's a situation where I tend to think that if Ridder can take over what he has in the past 2 weeks, take it on the road, I think the Falcons win this game. But again, he hasn't really been able to prove that he can do it on the road yet. And so my overall thoughts on the matchup is definitely a wait and see, but it's kind of how it is every week. But I do feel optimistic. Again, like last week, I felt there's always that feeling when people favor the Falcons. You kind of get that feeling of, can they really deliver? And it was kind of that same thing a lot of people had this summer of, expectations not exactly where Atlanta thrives. There's kind of been a lot of people, I feel like, picking Tampa Bay here. And again, the way last year's game in Tampa Bay went, I think there's added motivation. And I think the Falcons are eager to show that they are still a legit NFC South title contender this year. So I think they'll come out firing, and I'm excited to see that, because I feel pretty decent about the way this week should go.
Yeah, I agree. And this is the test. Like, this is where they have to be better than they're this is the team that you have to beat, essentially. Like, this is the one. Like, you don't have to beat the Eagles. You don't got to beat the 49ers. You got to beat the Bucs. Like, that's the team you got to beat. Like, that's what we're aiming for this year. And I think it's not that difficult to do. I think the Bucs are right around where the Falcons are. So we'll see. This is a good test, and if the Falcons fall flat on their face and look terrible against the Bucs, then we're going to feel a lot differently going into next week. But it's up to them to rise above, rise up in the old language of this team, right? And try to and beat a team that I think that they have a good chance to beat. But again, they haven't played well on the road at all. They played just god awful on the road, so that would be different for them. So that's a big test. The Bucs defense is a good defense. That's a big test. But it's time to put up or shut up at some point, right? I mean, I think by the end of October, like we need to see if this offense can do anything or if they're just going to languish and continue to implode. So it's not an easy game, not an easy matchup. These are two teams that know each other pretty well. But I feel better about this game than maybe I should. And yeah, you mentioned a lot of people are picking the Bucs. Yeah. I mean, I'm doing SB Nation's React surveys now. So I actually know of like 1,000 surveyed fans. I think over 75% of fans were picking the Bucs. So, there's not a lot of hope out there for the Falcons. And they just lost to the Commanders in pretty embarrassing fashion. So like, I mean, I don't blame any neutral observers for picking the Bucs at home when the Falcons have sucked on the road. So, so they need to defy the expectations, basically. They have to do better than people or think they have to play better. They have to be the surprise team this week, which they kind of were against Houston. I feel like going into that game, pretty much no one was picking the Falcons, but I was like, I feel like when they get counted out, that's kind of when they tend to just all of a sudden decide to play well. So very similar this week, but it's on the road. So can they do it? I don't know. What do you think? You think they'll pull it off, Daniel?
Yeah, I feel pretty decent about it because some weeks I enter just feeling okay, and this is kind of one of those weeks where I feel pretty solid that Sunday. I think I'll be writing about a Falcons victory. I think I'll be. It's just a weird feeling, man. Because like even going to the Washington game, you would think them losing 3 straight. There's just some things that I think for the people who've watched Falcons football for a long enough time, just know there's some trends that you look at and you're like, on paper, the Falcons have no reason to lose this game. And that just gives you a really bad feeling about like, oh, they could definitely lose this game. And so I think, you look at Tampa Bay and you look at the fact that a lot of people kind of are counting the Falcons out. I feel like, as you said, 75% leaning Tampa Bay. And you think about the fact that, again, as I said, I think the Falcons on paper probably have more talent than Tampa does. I think this is going to be a really big statement week for the Falcons. It's again, as you said, it's a big put up or shut up week. It's a big put up or shut up time. And I think the Falcons have the leaders on this team to kind of refocus everybody, realize that you are correct in this, belief that it is time. Like all the offseason hype is for now. You have to go out. You have to prove that all that talk that you had of like, hey, we're a new Falcons team. We are different. You got to go prove it now. You have to go show that. And this is a time. You're going on the road, NFC South rival, NFC South leader. If you win that game, I think you walk out of Tampa Bay leading the South, just about at the halfway mark. Not quite, but pretty close to it. Feeling pretty good about yourself. If you lose that game, you've lost 4 of your last 5. I think this is when you start to kind of feel that mid-season intensity. And how they respond to that, I think will be very telling. And I'm excited to watch that play out. But I do think the Falcons have the talent. I think they're going to come out, again, just knowing and hearing all that people have said inside the building about the way that they're wired. I feel pretty good about the way they'll respond, about the way they'll enter mentally. And I think they'll come out, and I do think that they'll walk out of Raymond James Stadium with a win on Sunday.
Yeah, it's certainly not what most are predicting, but I just feel weirdly like that they will do it. They just seem like the team that when people count them out, that they just show up, and I would like them to show up when people don't count them out too. That would be nice, but that's the next step, I guess. We can't ask for too much at once, but before we wrap up, guys, let me get to some donations from our mod, our resident mod, Noah C. What's up, Noah? He says, with the $5 in chat. Thanks, Noah. He says, I still think we end up benching Ridder and starting Taylor Heineke, or I wonder if they could pull off a trade for Kirk Cousins and let him get this offense rolling. We have so much talent, and Ridder isn't it for me. Yeah, no, I know you're pretty down on Ridder. But yeah, with these last 2 games, like after week 4, I would have said like we could be talking about Taylor Heineke playing right now, like easily. I think I said like, oh yeah, he's probably got 2 more games to show something, or they're going to go to Heineke. I think over the last 2 games, he's earned more time. Obviously, it hasn't been great. I mean, I think obviously week 5 was very nice. Week 6, less nice. So, but unlike week 4, there was at least something good to take away from week 6. So at this point, I don't see him getting benched anytime soon, and I really don't. I think they could make a trade with the Vikings, but not for Kirk. Maybe a man by the name of Danielle Hunter.
Little Danielle Hunter, yeah,
little Danielle Hunter, yeah. Is that who you want to? Is that your prime target?
That would be a fun one. Yeah, I would. I tend to think that'd be a very enjoyable trade target. You make that work. I think you're looking at, because again, I think it was Jerry Gray was talking today about Onyemata and Jared inside. You're seeing them block 2 with 3. So you're creating more one-on-one matchups outside. If you add Hunter, that is a nightmare front for opposing offenses. So I do think that'd be a very, very fun trade target. I think it'd be relatively pricey to pull off. But again, if you're the Falcons and you're planning on trying to contend and you think he's a piece that really pushes you over the top this year, and Ridder continues to show that he can take you to the playoffs and maybe win a game or 2, then have at it, have at it.
Yeah, I think if you get him for a second rounder, which you'll probably have 2, you can afford, like, he could be a long-term piece. Like, you're trading for him with the intention of giving him a contract. So, he's only 28. Like, I think he's getting close to 29, but like 28 years old, you're not getting a better pass rusher in the second round of the draft. Like, you're just not. So I think that's a fine idea. I think it's not just a rental for this year. I think you trade for him and re-sign him, and it's a damn good front. Now, it doesn't fix the biggest problem with this team, which is the offense, but I'm not sure there's too much you can do about that. Like, I really don't want to trade for Cousins at this stage. It's just so expensive for a guy that's going to be 36 next year. It's just a Band-Aid. I'd rather get like a true plus than a Band-Aid at this point. And if we need to reset at quarterback, which we still may need to do, like, that's very much, I would say that's the betting favorite right now, is we're still looking for a quarterback at the end of this season. I think like Ridder will make it interesting over the rest of this season, but I'm not sure that he'll play well enough that you're not going for a quarterback in the first round next year. But yeah, I'm sort of just, I think you go for the pass rusher that you've desperately lacked. And to be fair, I think Fontenot's done a great job in free agency and in trades. The draft, less so. So I would lean more towards, outside of the first round, I think he's nailed all the first round picks. So like, if we take a quarterback in the first round, it should be a shoe-in. But like, can't take a quarterback and an edge rusher. So what can you do? Maybe trade for a top edge rusher with your second round pick. Maybe that'll work out for you.
Yeah, it would be more cost efficient to trade 1 second round pick for a pass rusher and draft a quarterback in the first, rather than trade like 2 or 3 first round picks for a quarterback and draft an edge rusher in your second round with your second round pick.
That's just math.
Which again,
that's just math.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And again, even if you are trading up to go grab a Caleb Williams or Drake May, realistically, you're not probably going to slide up for Caleb Williams. But if you are moving up to like the top 5, for example, you might have to move a second round pick anyways. And of course, you still have, if you're moving your own second round pick, you still have Jacksonville's pick, but that's probably going to end up being like a mid to late 50s pick. So it's like, you're really not getting anyone better than what Hunter would provide. And again, I would be more I'd be more excited about acquiring Hunter, because like you said, you're getting that long-term pass rush value there too. Like you're getting a legitimate difference maker for not just your defensive front, not just your defense, really the entire team. And I tend to think that what better person for Hunter, as you said, trending towards 29, you put him in a room with Calais Campbell, who is about as good at showing and how to take care of your body, preserving your body, elongating your career as anybody in the NFL. So I think he'd be I think it's a type of move that you could see it pay off not only now, but I think even if you gave him a 3, 4, 5 year contract extension, he's got the tools around him to where that's going to pay off. So if you're going to invest, I would invest in Hunter.
Yeah, that's the one I'd swing for the fences for. Sneaky one, Kevin Byard too, because I think the Bucs or the Titans are potentially trying to move him. He's got a relatively low salary because of how he set up his contract with void years this year. And look, like, paying 2 safeties big money, not like the most ideal situation, but man, Kevin Byard is perfect for this defense. Like the same, like he's just a much more versatile overall safety. He can play deep, but he plays in the box. He plays slot corner. I think he's exactly the type of guy that Nielsen would want next to Jesse Bates. And look, maybe you just have a bunch of money tied up in safety. I don't know, but they got money. I mean, they got to spend it on somebody. So,
you know what? You might as well have the best safety tandem in the league. I mean,
if we can do that, maybe that, because we could get a bunch of turnovers that way. I mean, that might be our only ticket at this point. So maybe that's how we do it. But
there you go. I mean, hey, all the people watching in the comments, I know why not. I know why you should not tie up all the money in the safeties. I'm just, do not come at me with the pitchforks. It is just
look, this is just a hypothetical, okay? This is just
strictly a hypothetical.
There's nobody else named Kevin on the roster. I gotta stand for my guys. So,
one of my friends is a Phillies beat writer, and so his last name is Kelly, and they were all chanting "Kelly sucks" last night in the Phillies stadium, talking about Arizona's starting pitcher. So yeah, the name game in sports, man, you got to stick up. You got to stick up for them.
Got to support the brand. Got to. So
I'm pretty sure there's no Daniels on the Falcons roster right now either. Very sad.
I think you're right. Yeah, that's surprising. We got to get more representation for our names out there. As long as they're good. That's the most important thing. We need good Kevins and good Daniels, not just like, random guys. The good ones. The good ones, please.
Put them on a practice squad.
There you go.
Honestly,
anything, really.
Anything.
Yeah, really anything would work. We got Noah C with the $10. Thank you, Noah. He says, told myself I had a bad feeling with Matt Ryan being our commentator this weekend that we'd find a way to choke this away in front of him. Had those 3 possessions at the end of the game there to do something, and we get nothing. Yeah, I mean, depressing stuff, Noah, I know. Hopefully this weekend they can make it up to us. They need to make it up to us because they've been torturing us. Last week's game was just the biggest buzzkill. It's like, all right, oh man, we're gonna do it. Another fourth quarter comeback here. Okay, we didn't get it that time. That's okay. Okay, we're back. Nope. Okay. Oh, one more time. Really, we have another chance. Oh, okay, never mind. Yeah. So, yeah. Let's relax, please, Falcons, and just if we could just not turn the ball over, everything would be fine. Yeah.
It was definitely trending towards another fourth quarter comeback. And
it was.
Their numbers in the fourth in Mercedes this year are absurd.
Yeah.
Like absolutely pure domination. And so when they're driving and then prior to the false, the penalty on 3rd and goal from the 1, that delay of game, man, that was a dagger. There were so many plays in that game where it's like, oh, that's a backbreaker. It's like, oh, that'll do them in. And then it's like, nope, they got one more chance. It's like, oh, that'll do them in. And it's like, nope, one more chance. And it just keeps on going for 4 or 5 more plays. And you're like, surely that's the dagger. And it's still not the dagger. So they shout out the defense for really playing at a high level. But yeah, they definitely, it was a very on-brand loss, I feel like, considering that there were so many chances to win. But at the same token, for a minute, it felt like they were going to come back and erase a 14-point fourth quarter deficit, which would have been so not on brand. So it was a very interesting mixture. I don't know. Very conflicting.
Yeah, very conflicting indeed. So hopefully we can get a big dub this weekend and get a nice, fresh taste in our mouth that's not that depressing end to this game. We got one more from Brandon with the $2. Thanks, Brandon. He says, with our struggles on the offensive line and releasing Jalen Hawkins, why did we add another safety and then a running back to the practice squad? It's depth moves, Brandon. They're not these are not paradigm shifting moves. They cut a safety, they need to add a 4th safety and if you have 4 safeties on game day because you need the depth, and usually those safeties are your core special teams guys. So that's why they get the safety on the practice squad. I mean, I don't know why they're adding running backs to the practice squad. Maybe they like the guy. I mean, it's the practice squad. It is what it is, right? I'm sure they have their reasons. They're not getting a big upgrade to the offensive line with this little shuffle move. I mean, I don't think anyone they could maybe Lyle Collins, but he's clearly being picky about where he signs at this point. I don't think he's going to come to Atlanta to fight for a starting job with Caleb McGarry. I just don't think it's going to happen. So I don't think the Falcons are interested either, to be frank. So if there was an injury, maybe, right? But at this stage, we got a good half out of Storm Norton, so that they're probably feeling good about swing tackle at this stage.
He had
Toledo
a really
legend.
good 3-5
Yeah.
touchdown.
Yeah. So the storm's coming, Storm Norton. So it's just there's so many good things to do with that name. I just can't, like, I need more Storm Norton snaps so we can reference that more. But yeah, Brandon, again, guys, like, don't get wrapped up in like the roster churning moves. Like, they're not, like, these like big issues with the roster, they're not getting fixed this year, more than likely. Like, your best hope is for people to develop and continue to play better. And I think for guys like Matthew Bergeron, that's realistic to expect that. With guys like Caleb McGarry, maybe. But you look at the offensive line, they have played better, like especially in pass protection, things have sort of settled down. It's looked better, even against some really good pass rushes. So I think that they are playing better, but let's just look around the NFL. Like, look at the Giants. They were no Jalen Mayfield. Like, we're not slandering you anymore, I promise. But like, the Giants had to start Jalen Mayfield for 2 games. He had a 0 PFF grade in 2 straight games, and like they couldn't go and get anyone better, like, at this point, because that's the NFL. Like, offensive line is barren. Like, there's just not enough good offensive linemen for the NFL. It's just how it is. So you're kind of stuck with it. Like, it's one of those things, unless you're going to make a big trade or something like that, you're not going to really meaningfully upgrade your roster at this stage, unless you just get really lucky with someone who gets cut or waived, or you just strike gold somewhere, or somebody just pops, and that can happen, but it's unlikely. Yeah, Daniel, great conversation tonight. Always enjoy having you on. We're going to have you on like in a non-pinch hitting capacity at some point, where it's just like a casual, you just sort of, slide in. It's just, more of a part of the normal crew, but I do appreciate you stepping up tonight.
Yeah. I, as always, appreciate the invite. Appreciate the thought to have me on. It would be, it'd be a very unique feeling to like slide on and like join like the actual starters in rotation, and not just be like the only guy left on the bench who hasn't played any minutes yet, or like all the starters got like tossed from the game. And so it's like, oh, that guy's got to come in and play.
Yeah.
It feels like a Malice at the Palace situation sometimes. Yeah, as always, appreciate you having me on. Appreciate all the people who are watching, following along, and for sure watching a very enjoyable Falcons podcast on a Wednesday night. So shout out to you guys. Truly incredible.
Well, appreciate that, guys. He is Daniel Flick, now at by Daniel Flick on the Twitter X, whatever the hell they're calling it, platform, hellscape, you name it. Daniel, anything you had a great article earlier this week, looking at Ridder and some of those statistics. Anything else you're working on you want to let the people know about?
Yeah, I think I'll have just a couple casual Atlanta stuff from some of the press conference hits from today and this week, and just all the way leading up through Sunday, and then repeat the cycle on Monday and just continue to churn out content. Right. It's mid-season grind is completely here. This is what we sign up for. I love it. I'm very tired as well, but I love it. And I have a lot of readers who've been very interactive lately, and it all makes it worth it, and all makes me feel very warm seeing the support. So again, shout out all the fans of everybody, all the people who have no idea who I am. Shout out to you guys too. I love you all. SI.com/NFL/Falcons for all of my Atlanta stuff. There are several talented writers who also contribute on that website, who I'm sure would appreciate you guys as well. Every Monday I have an article I come out with called Flicks Forum, where I pick what I consider to be the hottest topic from the game, and I write about 1,000+ words on my personal take on it. That's one of the things I enjoy doing. So pretty fluid flow of content. That's what I work on. Again, appreciate you guys all stopping by.
Absolutely. Well, thank you once again, Daniel. Guys, I'm Kevin Knight at Falcoholic. Kevin, thank you for tuning in tonight. Please like, subscribe if you haven't done so already. Leave that 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice. Tonight's show is, of course, brought to you by BetOnline. Check us out on Patreon if you want to support the show. Guys, we'll see you very soon. I think we'll have our next game preview coming out on Friday with the guys from the Cannon Fire podcast covering the Bucs over on the Believe Podcast Network. So we'll be hanging out with those guys, talking a little bit about this game. And, of course, we'll be back for more post-game coverage on Sunday. Please get that big dub so we can have a nice dub. It just makes it easier for me. I know the really like dark post games are sometimes fun, but I would prefer to hold off on those if we can. I don't want to go to that well too early. I'd rather that happen, not this week if we could help it. That two in a row is too much. If we could just have some space, that'd be good. But guys, thanks again so much for joining us. Yeah. Thanks again for joining us here on the Falcoholic Live. We'll see you guys next time. Have a great night, folks.